Hi, Base Gardener here, and I want to talk about what I see as a looming crisis here in Canada and probably across other Western countries too in elder long term care. So, to set up the problem, there are 9,200,000 baby boomers in Canada right now. That's a full 1/4 of our population. So baby boomers, that's folks born between 1946 and 1964, after the war years there. And so the youngest of the baby boomer generation right now is set to retire in the next 4 years. And looking into this, about 70% of those people, um, as they get over the age of 65, will require long-term care at some point. So when you look at that ends up being 6,500,000 Canadians who, some point in the next 10 to 20 years are going to require long-term care of one variety or another. So currently, our system in Canada for elder care supports 198,000, basically 200,000 residents spread out across the country. And my wife actually works in long-term care, so I've gotten some information from her, and I've gathered a bunch of numbers from elsewhere. But my opinions are my own, and don't represent her thoughts on the subject necessarily. But she's been great to talk to about this stuff, and is one of the reasons I've been thinking about this issue in the first place. So you look at that number. So you've got you know well over 6 million Canadians who are going to be requiring care, in the next 10 to 20 years. And of course, you're also going to require a great deal of staff. So you've got, everything from care aides, nurses, doctors, cooks, cleaners, recreation therapists, etc. So, let's say conservatively, you might need one staff for every, let's say, 3 to 4 residents. So that puts you in the range of, let's say another 1.5 to 2.5 million Canadians who would be required, under our current system to staff the needs of those baby boomers who are heading into care. And I mean, to me, when I look at that problem, it's just struck me that the math isn't going to work. Our current system, the way we look after our elderly in this society, essentially consists of two basic streams. You have like home care, where you have care aides and nurses and things like that who make visits to people's homes, and that accounts for a smaller portion of the care in Canada, and the majority are in these long-term care facilities. And so there's a great deal of these facilities across the country right now, and I'm sure there's more being planned, and there's more currently under construction, set to open, what have you. But 198,000, that's our current capacity. So to go from that to, I know it's not all going to be an immediate glut of 6.5 million all at once, but even if that's, staggered throughout that 10 to 20 year period, I just don't think that our system is going to be able to handle those kind of numbers. And I don't think that the staffing or the planning and construction of those facilities is remotely realistic under our current system. So when I think about this problem, it strikes me that something's going to have to give. Something's going to have to change in the way that elderly people are cared for. Now, you look at other countries like Japan, who have an even more advanced aging demographic in their country. I know that there's been some technological breakthroughs. There's like robotics. There's AI. There's different things that can help and maybe require fewer staff per resident. But I don't think that's going to solve the problem in its entirety, and especially because we're a far more spread out society here in Canada. There's a lot of rural areas. There's a lot of places where some of those technological solutions might be a lot more of a challenge. So my personal suspicion is that, particularly here in Canada, a lot more of the duty of care is going to fall upon families, friends. And I don't want to beat up on the baby boomer generation. I know it's a real popular thing in culture right now to kind of like blame a lot of society's problems on the baby boomer generation. And, you know, you can argue whether or not that's fair. But what I will say is that I do think that for if I was a baby boomer and I was looking at the prospect of retiring and thinking about my care needs going forward, I would not feel confident relying on our system as it stands right now. It's similar to the pension. Like when you have a really top heavy age demographic in a culture, you know, like those programs don't have the necessary input from the bottom end, of young workers to sustain them, in their current iteration. So if I was a baby boomer, I would probably be looking at my family, my friends, and thinking about how can I provide a situation that's going to provide incentive for my family to look after me, and of course also meet my needs as they grow with age. So you know, although this is something similar to what a lot of society is asking of the boomers, I think what needs to happen is looking carefully at your life and seeing if, okay, is there a young family who I can maybe provide some incentive, like, hey, you know um, you can inherit my house and my estate if you're willing to agree to provide for my care, uh, you know as needed, because that's going to be a big job, right? For a lot of people, it require kind of a 24/7 care, and that's no walk in the park. I can say, having a wife who works in that field, an 8-hour shift is quite a bit, and these are people who are trained to do this kind of work. So that's one end of it, and for young people, I think it's going to be smart to think about, if you have a parent or a grandparent who's in that age range, you may not be able to rely on our system as it exists as your family member ages. And so you probably want to have conversations with them about, realistically, what is care going to look like? What if there's a 30-year wait list and nobody's getting into these facilities anymore? We're going to have to think outside of the box on this. And I really do suspect that this is kind of a looming crisis that really isn't getting the airtime that it deserves right now. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the subject, and happy to hear your comments if you have any. Take care.